Today's topics are going to be, the new topics are going to be occurrences and reality. Before we get to that, we have a few other things we're going to chat about to kick off the class. The quote for the day is, reality is a mere illusion, albeit a very persistent one. And you'll see this kind of as a recurring theme today as we get into reality, is what are the differences between reality and virtual reality? And even to the extent of, is reality really real? Which sounds like a little bit, if you haven't thought about those things before, at first it seems kind of a silly question. But as you get into it, as I'll show you here some examples, you'll see that it's somewhat debatable as to what reality actually is. So, before we get into the new topics, we'll wrap up decision making, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the homework that you just did, and then I'll talk about the homework that's going to be due next Thursday, also at 11:59. So, I'm sorry, not Thursday, Wednesday. Thank you. Next Wednesday at 11:59. So that is not available yet. It's going to be available tomorrow. I'll explain that. And then we'll jump into reality. So to wrap up, last time we talked about multiple steps of decision making. There was 4 recommendations I chose amongst the alternatives because I had never been to this place, but I had heard that it was a good place to go, and it was one of the 4 that you guys put on the list. So we took our friends there from Ukraine/Ohio, and then just to finish, here as a review of the decision. I don't think I need to say anything else. It's pretty yummy. So thank you for going through that exercise, and because of that, we ended up actually going to a new place, which was kind of fun. Sometimes it's hard. We get into habits. Remember we talked about the mental shortcuts last time, and we tend to do the same things or the things we're familiar with over time because we've learned that they work or we've learned that we like them. So sometimes it's good, or at least I like to try new things. So on Monday we went to this place. On Tuesday we went to another place called Hacienda Latina. Have you ever been there? I had never been there. It's actually on Route 2, so it's not, if you don't have a car, it's not the, but right across from the Shell gas station that's near the Sam's Club and all that kind of stuff. And apparently it's been there 11 years, and it's gotten great reviews. So yesterday I said, you know what, we tried a new place. It was good, recommendation of the students. Let's try this place. And it was really, really good. We actually met the owner, and for some reason he showed us a picture. He had taken a selfie with Sonia Sotomayor, who had gone there recently to eat at his restaurant. So Hacienda Latina, if you want to try something different. Homework number 1. Okay, if you're thinking, man, that was kind of tough. I had to write all those things and get it in before 11:59 at night. Yesterday, I dedicated the entire day to reading all of these things. And it was surprisingly addicting, to be honest with you. I had never done this exercise before. And to the extent that, basically I got to see a lot of models and a lot of discussion about why that model was applicable to the person who created the model. And I thought to myself, man, if I was ever doing dating or something like that, I think I'd ask like my potential partner to create a model about themselves and how they work. because I found it to be actually more insightful than maybe anything else I could ever think of about asking someone. So you might consider that if you're thinking about getting married or something, to ask your partner to create a model of themselves. So here's some general observations. Make sure you read and understand the questions. For the most part, it was clear that you read and understand the questions. In some cases, it was clear to me that the question wasn't really understood. Make sure you answer the question, and that means all parts of the question. So in some cases, there was examples where it said, name and describe. And so a few of you named, but you didn't necessarily describe. Or it said something like, what is the hypothesis or prediction, and could it be tested, and how? And so just make sure. I know sometimes, especially, I noticed the trend sort of as the homework went on, as the numbers went on, it seemed like there was more people that were not completely answering the question. And that just might be because they were at 8, 9, and 10, and the time was running out that you had. So, but just keep track of that, because I want everyone to do well on the homework. And if you just don't answer the whole question, it's hard to do well, because you may know the answer, but you just didn't put anything down there. Some people use this tool. Most of the answers I got were back in English, which is fine. If it's helpful, don't forget that you're allowed, unless I tell you otherwise, you're allowed to answer the question in Spanish if you prefer. And there were some that answered in Spanish, and frankly, they were just fantastic. So either way, I can read them both the same. So if you find you're trying to communicate something that's a little intricate and you're unsure if you're communicating it well, the objective of this class is not language, it's to have you learn the material. So feel free to answer in that language, because it'll be helpful to you. Some specific comments on some of the questions. Some of the models were not of you. So the question basically, number 3, I didn't put it up here, but it's supposed to be of you. And so some of the models were clearly not of the person who created the model, or it was a little unclear, because they kept referring to the model saying this about humans and saying this about humans. And remember that you only have access to yourself. And so that's what we're going through right now. We'll get to talking about how you might understand things and to what extent you can understand things about other people. But if there's a lesson to take away from this is, once you understand how you work, don't necessarily expect that the model that well describes you is going to be the model that well describes the person that's sitting next to you. Okay. So what hypothesis or prediction of your model could be tested, and how? This one, I think, was the toughest actually for everybody, although most people did well still, even on this one. And the thing I wanted to clarify here is it's the hypothesis or prediction of the model, not the hypothesis or prediction of the person. So some people were giving me an answer that was related to the person themselves, or if they missed that part, to some other human being, instead of the hypothesis and prediction of the model itself. Analogy, it took me a little while to figure out. There were a few folks that were really just provided similes, and I don't know if the word for analogy and simile in Spanish is similar or not, but the analogy of the model is to the target. That's what the question was for. So you have your model, you have your target. It's a fancy way of really saying what's similar in your model, what's similar about your model to the target, which should have been you, or how you think, behave, or feel. Because it could be the object or some process associated with the object, but the target had somehow was intended to involve you, because question number 3 was set up to make that a requirement. Um, some of you, most of you should be sitting here saying, yeah, I got that, because most of you got it. I'm just saying it. I'm touching on things that where more than one, person seemed to be getting stuck on the same thing. And then the last one, can your model be implemented in computer code? Explain why or why not. Most people got this all right or mostly right, but there was some confusion about what the purpose of the computer code was. So the purpose of the computer code in this question is to implement the model. And the idea, remember, is this. If you remember Simon, the Turing Nobel Prize winner, sometimes you can take a complicated problem and simplify it and then solve the simplification of the problem. Everything we've been doing is for that. Because if you sit there and try to figure out how am I going to write a program, that reflects Angel or Hector, and you're that person, you're going to say, it's just way too complicated. There's just too many variables. But one common thing that all of you did was you created models. And when you did that, you necessarily simplified. You necessarily put something down, even if it looked complicated. I assure you, you as a human being are far more complicated than what you could ever put down on a piece of paper. So this question was meant to have you thinking, okay, I'm going to focus on the model, and can I implement the model, and what can I implement, or what may be difficult to implement. And that, I just wanted to clarify that this isn't implementing a robot, or it's not implementing you as a person. It's just simply implementing the model. I put everything in Moodle. Some of you may already have looked. I don't know if it gives you some sort of alert. I'll skip this and I'll go back to the other one. I did everything in Moodle. Everything's there. It's all graded. It took me an entire day. And the reason it did is because they were all obviously essay questions, and your answers to some depended upon your model and your description of the model and so forth. So I needed to really understand what each of you had done. So I graded all of them. All the grades are in Moodle. Most of the class did very well. If you did not do well, you need to first self-assess and ask yourself, did I read the material? And I don't mean like right before you had to do the homework. I mean, because the material, I want you to succeed, so I'm always going to put it up there way in advance. That way you can kind of fit it in when it makes sense. If you're reading it for the first time when you're doing the homework, you're probably not going to have a chance to absorb it. And if you don't absorb it, you're not going to be able to do number 2 there, which is use Piazza or office hours to clarify any doubts about what you read. Right? So if you read it, you didn't get it, I'm sitting in there in my office for sure on Mondays and Wednesdays, unless I announce a change in the office hours for that week. And I'm available on other days and other times, okay? But obviously, if you're reading it and you're trying to do the homework last minute, you're probably not going to be able to reach me unless you get lucky on Piazza. If you read it and you looked at your score, you look at it, and you did poorly, and you felt like you thought you understood it, then come see me, right? Because the first part is low-hanging fruit. If you did not do the work, if you didn't read anything, and you're not happy with your results, then there's not really much of a benefit to come see me right now, because basically you need to go first and just do what I ask you to do, which is to read stuff, and then I'm there to help you. So I want to help you. That's the only reason I'm here, just to make sure that you get this material. Now I'm going to go back. Good news is they were phenomenal. Some of the models were very, very simple. Like they didn't have a lot going on in the figures. But when you read the descriptions, it just, there was a lot there, and things made a lot of sense, even from subtle details. Others were very detailed and seemingly complex. So when I first saw them all, I was like, how the heck are they going to explain this? And then I would read the descriptions, and they would make a lot of sense. I would like to, during this semester, show examples of these models that you produce, with the proviso that I'm not going to tell anybody who created the model. If you, because this is a personal model of yourself, don't want me showing the model, even though I'm not going to say who created the model, send me an email and say, hey, I'd prefer you don't show my model in class, and I'll make sure I don't show your model in class. But the reason I want to do this is because some of the models actually do a really good job of illustrating certain points that are going to come out later in the class in a way that that I think is really value add. So I'd like to be able to pull those, put them up here. And again, I'm not going to say, this is your model, this is how you think, and share that with the class, but it would be, this is a model that was contributed by someone in class, and that's it. Now, if you want to say, hey, that's my model, that's fine with me. No problem with that, right? But I don't want to show something that's personal, that's yours, that you feel, and then point you out and have you feel like I did a disservice to you. So if you don't want your model shown under those scenarios where I'm not going to say whose it is, send me a note, and I'll make sure it doesn't happen. Last point, I think, is a really important point, and I'd like to get some feedback on the class. So no two models were the same. Not only were they not the same, I would have a hard time picking out actually significant similarities in the model, which surprised me, which really made me happy for a lot of reasons. But what I'd like to hear from you now is, why do you think that no two models were the same? No two persons are exactly the same. That's a really good answer. What other reasons? Yes. Exactly. Very good. So no two people necessarily see themselves the same way someone else sees them. Yes. Absolutely. Exactly. So, and then even it kind of related to that one, and the other two are, when you're doing this exercise, there are going to be things that come up in your mind. Maybe there are things that you're thinking about, or things that just happen, and those may influence the things that you want to put in your model, right? So excellent work on the models, really. So you should, I think for the most part, when I read it, I could tell that people really spend time trying to understand themselves and trying to figure out how to put something down on paper. I went through that already. Okay, homework number 2. And again, most of you did fantastic on homework number 1. Did anybody actually look at their grade already? Do you know you could see it? There's no problem. I did put some comments in there if you missed some things. Sometimes even if you didn't miss some things, I might put a brief little comment. But if you have any questions about it, or you want to come talk to me, we can set up a time, or you can come on Monday during the office hours, or send me an email. I'm sorry, or private Piazza if it's private or whatnot. Okay, so homework number 2, the required reading for both of these was already assigned before. So if you did get a jump start on it, when you do the homework, you're already going to be in the lead. It's going to be really hard to do the homework unless you read the introduction in chapter 1 of the book, How Emotions Are Made. And if you don't have handy and haven't read the Influence Tactics, that was like the 27 things. This one is more straightforward, I'd say, the homework. You know, whereas the other one was like a little abstract and individual where you had to think about yourself and create these models. This is just really making sure these questions, there's some true and false questions, I think, and things like that. Most of your time is probably just going to be spent making sure you understand the reading. And if you do, you'll be able to do the homework. There's a few things you have to think about, but most of them are applied to what you're reading, okay? It's not up yet because I'm still tweaking some of the questions, but we're still on schedule. It's the one that's due next Wednesday. I keep wanting to say Thursday. It's going to be available before midnight tomorrow night. My plan is to, once I do put it up, to send a message on Piazza. But you have plenty of time still to do it. And if you start doing the reading, you'll already be doing the homework before you see the question. All right, that was a big introduction, but we have 7 homeworks. We did 1, and I thought it was important since I want you to succeed on your homeworks, which together is a good way to get most of 30% of your grade. Go and spend time on that. And also, since you had very clearly, for the most part, invested a lot of time in the homework, I wanted to acknowledge that was reflected in the quality of most of the work that was turned in. In the cases where it wasn't, just again clarifying, you know, I can't tell if it's just that you don't understand the concepts, or if it's just that you didn't spend the time to do the reading. So if you didn't understand the concept, come see me and I'll help you with the concept. Modeling is a really important concept within this course. So that assignment's really important to understand. All right, so now we're going to talk about a very specific model. This is sort of the stair-step model of how a human being might work in a way that can be implemented in code. And so you might remember the classic decision model. That's where we have the 7 steps that ended up converting into a dessert at the end. I told you that that's a good model because if you find circumstances where you can describe a system with a model like that, it's relatively easy to implement because you implement one module and the results go into the other and the results go into the other. You finished your 7 steps and you're done, okay? This is set up to be in that way. So it's to say, look, I know the world doesn't really work this way, but if I can force or look initially at the world in this way, then I know I can implement these things, okay? And then I can put arrows and parallel things later. So it's simplistically saying there is an environment. And my human being that I'm going to model and then implement in some computerized system exists within this environment. And they exist in the environment that's around them. And then things happen that cause perturbations in the environment. Those things that happen we call occurrences. I didn't invent the word, it's just an occurrence. It's just something that happened, okay? The environment that we're in is called reality. It's the reality of the environment that we happen to be in. The reality that there's desks here and you're sitting on chairs and there's a projector. It's just the reality of the moment. The occurrence is anything that's going to happen. So a word that I say is an occurrence. You're hearing the word that I say is an occurrence, okay? So you can think of occurrences as lots of things that are happening all over the place all the time. And the reality is the reality of it all at any given time, if that's a simplistic way of looking at it. In that environment, we have our senses, right? And in computers or computerized systems or electronic systems, we have sensors. And that's meant to take something from reality and create something that we can observe. We observe it by generating data. We analyze the data. We represent the data, and this is the models, okay? In AI, we can do machine learning on that, which creates knowledge. We can teach a system, hey, every time you see something like this, it's a banana. And every time you see something like this, it's an apple. Or when you see something like this is a human being that's smiling, and this is a human being that's not smiling or that's frowning. And you can apply then, if you can figure these things out, you can apply reasoning or some sort of rules. We saw rules in Sophia, right, related to if someone was asking her something about the weather, then Sophia knew that she should call the engine related about the weather. Or if Sophia, was told that someone, that a facial expression from the sensor engine was smiling, then she could say, why are you smiling? Or why are you happy? Or something like that. So that's the kind of reasoning we're talking about there. To the extent we want to make decisions, like we talked about in the classical decision making, we can use that to make plans, decide on an action, and actually do something. In a robot, you can move something. In a robot, you can say something. To some extent, some of your models went through this as well, right? When you decided what you wanted to do for people who modeled decision making within their models, the question was, okay, now I decided, what am I going to do? Am I going to say something? Am I going to do something? So very simplistic model. You can see there are some things here related to feedbacks. If you've done some reasoning, you may need to access knowledge or representation to actually make a decision. Okay. Today, we're going to focus on this box here, the environment. Okay. So don't worry about this. That's why we have other classes. Any questions up to now? There's going to be another interactive part of this, but I want to make sure we're okay. Okay, so an occurrence I talked about before. These are just online dictionary definitions. An occurrence is something that occurs. I always find those to be extremely useful definitions because it means I got to go find out what occurs means. I'm saving you. Occurs is to be found, to be, or met with, to come into existence, or to come to mind, actually. That's kind of interesting because without looking at the definition, if you just ask someone randomly on the street and about occurrence, they may not say something that comes to mind as an occurrence. Because if it's just a thought I had, did something really happen? Okay. We're going to define 6 types of occurrences together. And there's a reason for this because, again, when we talk about creating systems that have some sort of artificial general intelligence, those systems exist in some reality. They exist in some world. And there's going to be things that happen, and our systems need to respond to that. And depending upon characteristics of those occurrences, it's going to help us say, occurrences of this type I may need to respond to them in this kind of way. And occurrences of this other type, maybe I don't need to respond to at all. So these 6 classifications of types of occurrences are intended to help you think about things that happen because they're very different in terms of how they affect the system, in this case, the human, and in AI implementation, the expression of that human and artificial system. They are direct, internal, derived, being, inside another, and remote. Those are the 6 types of occurrences. If you think of something that occurs that doesn't fit into one of these 6 categories today, raise your hand and let me know. Because chances are it does, but if it doesn't, I want to know about it. Okay? There's a reason they're separate. The ones on the top, direct, internal, or derived, tend to have an immediate impact on the system. The ones on the bottom, being, inside another, and remote, tend not to have an immediate impact on the system. So right away, if you're looking at a bunch of occurrences that are going to affect this creature that you're trying to create or this robot, being able to categorize them into these buckets is going to tell you whether or not you need to respond to that occurrence quickly or whether or not you have time to run that process in the background and come up with a solution for it. Okay? All right, so this is where the interactive part comes. First type of occurrence is a direct occurrence. This is what most people think of, I think, as an occurrence. A direct occurrence is a very specific circumstance that happens that you can touch, hear, see, taste, smell in the moment. Therefore, it may influence your perspective immediately. A tree falls down right now in the forest in Ukraine, not a direct occurrence. Probably a tree did fall down right now, right? But it's not affecting our touch, hearing, seeing, tasting, and smelling in the moment. If we were in Ukraine next to the tree, it might, okay? So, but this occurrence is an example. So what I'd like you to do is give me 3 examples so I can fill them up here of occurrences that are direct occurrence. Raise your hand, please. The virtual reality stuff is really fun. So, change of weather. Change of weather here, right? So maybe if it rains here and you could see it, but if it rains over there and you can't hear it and see it, then it's not direct. So let's put 0. Next. That's a good one. Power goes out here. Observable when it happens. No one? I raised my hand. That's a I raised my hand in your presence. Raised hand when you can see it. Okay? Fairly straightforward. This is the simplest of it all. If it happens in your senses, whatever it is, can observe it as it is happening, then it's a direct occurrence. All right. Type of occurrence, internal. Internal occurrences are very specific circumstances that happen entirely inside of you, involving your thoughts and or your emotions. It may influence your perspective immediately. Okay, what are things that can happen inside of you? Say it again? Panic attack. Very good. I'm sure that's not happening to any of you here right now, but okay. Recalling a moment, right? So things going on that have to do with accessing your memories. Okay. I'll put one here. I'll save mine for the third one. So all of your observations of reality, the bold one. Your seeing me is all in your head. I may be here, but it's all in your head. I don't know what, for all I know, when you look at me, you might see someone really tall. But no idea, I'm not in your head. Yeah. That's exactly, no, we call them internal. So we'll separate them. So, good question. So direct is one that interacts with these senses. And in the case Where it's internal, meaning that you are the only one that could possibly observe it, then it's going to be internal. Okay. So you can think about it, if it's something that's happening because of the world that you're in, if it's an occurrence that's doing that, and because you're in this world, present where it's happening, you can observe it, then it's direct. If it's only happening inside of you, it's internal. Now, if you're laughing at something inside of your head, but you're smiling, right? Then the smiling part is something that's now direct because it's outside, observable, right? It's an indication to me that maybe you're thinking about something funny, but I actually don't know what you're thinking about. That's internal. Okay. So we want to separate out these things, because anything that's in your head that you're the only, that falls into an occurrence that's internal, we want to recognize that you're the only one that has access to that information. Okay. So right now there are, all the students in this room have most of the information that's being thought about right now all internally in their head. So when I say things, I don't actually know what you're hearing. And I don't know what you're remembering. Always really important. Last one is being. Being occurrences, very specific circumstance that happens to your physical being without you being aware. Therefore, it is not sensed and does not influence your perspective immediately. Okay, that's going on all the time in your head, and in your body. There's molecules that are moving. There's chemicals that are changing. There's proteins that are flowing. There's hopefully none of you, but there could be tumors that are growing, right? So all sorts of things going on in our bodies that are in our bodies, and we don't know that they're happening. I've jumped now to that other category, and I apologize for that. Somehow I skipped derive. I wanted to do the three together because those are the ones we worry about the most because they impact you immediately. Okay. So we'll go back to that when I pause. The last one, in terms of things that may influence your perspective immediately, are derived. Okay. Derived are things, are very specific circumstances that happen which inform you of another possibly previous occurring circumstance. You are informed through your senses, therefore it may influence your perspective immediately. So, a tree fell in Ukraine. You weren't in Ukraine, right? But someone calls you and says, "Hey, I just barely escaped. Like, my car is totally totaled because I rented it and I'm in Ukraine and a tree fell on it." Okay, so that's a derived event. That means that something that it wasn't coincident with it affecting you. It happened before. Okay, that could be hearsay. Watching a live video, or not live, sorry, watching a video of something that happened before, like on the news or something, that's a derived occurrence. Okay, that means that something happened before. I need to come up with better examples, but if a missile were to shoot from somewhere, like 20 minutes ago here, which didn't happen, actually, I don't know if it did, right? But that would be derived. It's already happened. It's on its way. We're not going to know about it till sometime after it happened. So the occurrence happened, but it's going to have an impact on us that's displaced in time. And we call those derived. Okay, we're responding to what's actually happening now, but it was initiated by something that happened before. Any questions on those three? Those three are the most important in the sense that those are things that generally affect a human being in the moment or approximate moment when they occur. That's correct. Yep. So that was, we need two more real quick. What did you say again? Pain. It wouldn't be the pain. Let me think about that one, and I'll get back to you on that in the chat. Now, one thing I will say is there's not clear, crisp dividing lines between some of these things. Okay? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great.
I think what's trying to say is this is the kind of thing that's defined that measuring process that something has to happen there to look the law.
Right. You mean inside, something happened inside of you and then you feel it. Is that what you're asking? Yeah. So it would start in what we're going to next here, which is the being. That's something that's happening that you're not aware of. And then you transition to be aware of it. So if we're looking at that thing that happened that you weren't aware of, it would initially be in this category. And my inclination is to say that it would not fall in this category. That's my, but I want to hesitate before I say that, because it would have come from this category. In other words, there are things that happened before, so it is a result of something that happened before that led to the pain, but the thing that happened before wasn't something that was observable somewhere by someone. But let me think about that and answer in written form on Piazza. Okay, this is one we've talked about a little bit. It's being inside another. Inside another occurrences, a very specific circumstance that happens entirely inside of another person while you're interacting with them. Okay, so remember, all of these occurrences, I should have mentioned this from the start, are from your perspective. Okay. Why? Because if it's happening inside of you, an occurrence from your perspective means that it's internal to you. If it's internal to you, you have access to it. No one else does. So for you, that event is what we call number 2, right? It's internal. But that same event, the same thought that you had, which for you is internal from your perspective, for someone else is inside another. Most things that happen in the world, most of your observations of what happened in the world are only inside your head. There's one takeaway from this. That's what it is. And everybody else is sitting here with independent, lots of information, but it's independent of yours. And the way that you can try to exchange some of that knowledge is by communicating or interacting with each other. I'm going to skip these in terms of writing stuff in. I'll write stuff in there before I put it on Moodle, just in the interest of time. The last one is the remote one, which we already had the example of the tree falling somewhere and you don't hear about it, which can turn into a derived event. So you can see why something that's remote, when it actually happens, you actually have no way of actually knowing that it happened, okay? For you to know about it, it has to turn into a derived event. That's why we don't worry about remote too much. Now, we can worry about remote later, because if you do have some information or ability to get some information as to what's happening somewhere else, that may influence your decision now, right? So if you're programming a robot to run across the street, you might want to have the robot check the weather, the satellite view to see, or the local whatever, to see if it's actually raining there, even if you don't have any windows. Okay, so you might want to get derived information. But for now, we're talking about occurrences and responding. We want to know things that we're going to have to deal with immediately. Okay, so that's occurrences, and now reality. Augmented reality, all of you probably are somewhat familiar with. I didn't put Pokemon Go here, but that was kind of a craze. Is there anybody who has not seen or is not familiar with augmented reality, at least an example of that? So augmented reality is, it's basically supplementing a view of the world. Definition here is a direct or indirect view that's live, that's happening in real time, where the real world environment is augmented or supplemented. This is an app where if you put a $1 bill on a table and look at it through your phone, you'll get information about the White House. If you don't have the $1 bill, you're not going to get the information. Virtual reality is an artificial environment that's created with software. Key to this is most virtual reality today is created with sight and sound. Okay, this is, and actually I have more time than I thought because I looked at my computer and I thought we were running out of time, so we're okay. Okay, so this is from 1965. It's a gentleman named Ivan Sutherland, who's credited with making one of, if not the first, virtual reality headset. If you want to think about time-wise, if you're familiar with Oculus or some other headsets, 1965 is a long time ago. It's so long ago, I wasn't even alive in 1965, okay? So, but you can see, doesn't look too incredibly different than some things that you've seen maybe people playing around with now. If you're familiar with like Google Glass, the idea of having a glass where you can see and have some additional information projected in front of you, that's an augmented reality. You can actually see the person's eyeball here, and that's because in this virtual reality system, it was really augmented. They could actually still see, but they would see things that weren't actually there. If you look here, you'll see these sort of contraptions above it. The reason is back in 1965, even though it may not look that big, this thing was really, really heavy. And because it was so heavy, they actually had fixtures above it to try to remove some of the weight from the person that was using it. So over 50 years of an idea of virtual reality, but putting something on your head to get to where we are now with some things. I'm going to show you a video now.
I actually don't think there's any sound on this one, but there's on the next ones. So that's basically it. And we have to think about computational capability in the 1960s. They were literally rendering a cube that was defined just by lines. And based on the way he was looking would allow him to look at the cube at a different perspective. So what we do today is a lot more sophisticated, but you know, those same concepts of putting something and having your motion adjust something that you're seeing was something that was initially thought of a long time ago, and there was work in that regard. I'm not going to disconnect the audio there because we're going to go back to it pretty quick here. What is reality? These are quotes from 4 different people over time. Reality is a mere illusion, albeit a persistent one. That was the one I opened up with. I kept the Old English here. All that glisters is not gold. Reality leaves a lot to the imagination, and everything you can imagine is real. I wanted to find one in Spanish. I found this one. Reality, a real event, entity, or state of affairs. Yeah, real event. So I better see what a real event is. Having objective, independent existence. So, can you know how fast something moves at the same time you know its exact location? So if you have a picture of something, you can tell that. So the answer, according to Heisenberg, and most people familiar with these limitations, is no, you can't. And the reason is that in order to know how fast something's moving, you need some displacement to observe or measure them, which means that you need to know where it was at 2 different moments in time. And so it means if I want to know where something is at this moment in time, to know it, I need to be able to figure out what it's going to be at some other moment of time or some moment of time before it to get an approximate amount, but I can never get an exact amount at that time because I always have to compute the velocity over 2 different times. It's more fundamental than that, but that's basically an intuitive way of thinking about it. So, and I put this up here because there's sort of a corollary there at the bottom with respect to, can something be observed at the exact same time that it exists? And so now getting into the definition related to things that are real. Things that are real exist independently of observation. That means whether or not I'm there or not, I'm observing it, it exists. Things that are real occur independently of observation. It means things happen even if they're not being observed. And they are as they are independently of observation. And that means if I have a certain mass, that's my mass, whether it's observed or not observed. Observation breaks strict reality. And if there's anything about reality we talked about today that's important or that stands above other things, it's that right there. Observation breaks strict reality. As soon as you try to observe something, you've left reality. So whether I'm here, what I look like is all in your head. My existence at any given time, for you to observe it, it takes time for it to observe it. So by the time you observe it, you're observing what I was. I saw an interesting article a while ago on CNN, CNN Science News, and it said that some star somewhere had been sucked into a black hole this week. Now, if you're familiar with science and the speed of light and things like that, you realize that that star that was sucked into the black hole, sucked into the black hole 50, 70 billion years ago. long time. And so there's this displacement of observation that's obviously exaggerated there. But even here, when I say something, there's some amount of time from when I said it to when you heard it. So whatever it is you want to observe, that strict reality is, right? Now, so that goes to the last part, which can something be observed at the same exact time as it exists? The answer to that would seem to be no. Because to observe, like Heisenberg and certain principles, requires some time, something to happen to allow the observation. All right, so you don't have to worry about that because we go through, just like we said, virtual reality is mostly about what we see and what we hear. Okay? So as long as what we see and what we hear is a relatively good approximation of the reality we're trying to observe, then we can go about our daily lives and do productive things, right? So even though we don't necessarily observe a strict reality, we like to think that what we see is approximate what reality is. Okay, so there are two tables there. Okay, they have a length and a width. Very simple question. Which of the tables has a length that's longer than the other table? Well, let's do a voting so we get 100% participation. Who thinks that the table on the right has a length that is longer than the table on the left? Now I'm going to see everybody's hands go up on this next question. I think. Who thinks the table on the left has the longest dimension? Who thinks they're equal or is too shy to raise their hand? All right, let me see if I can do this here. This is my ruler. Pretty close? Yeah? Try to do this. Oh, wait, I don't have to do that. You can just. No. Let me try one more time. Oh, there it is. Rotate, flip. I'm just going to rotate it. I'm not going to make it bigger or longer. There we go. And I'm just going to move it over. Pretty close? Yeah, let's see if we can do it again with this guy. This time a little faster. I don't remember what the angle is on this, so let's try 45 and see what happens. Or maybe it's 65, 67 again. Oops. Let me move this. Oh. So that's about right there, right? Let's rotate. You agree? It's about. I'm gonna rotate this guy. I should have memorized the angle better, but let's try 67, see what happens. Oops, let's try 0. Ha. Well, that one worked. Right? So at least as far as our eyes are concerned, the reality of the dimensions there are different than what I think we would have probably bet some money on or lunch or something. This is a guy named Harry McGurk. He's not with us anymore. He passed away in 1998. And actually, one of the homeworks had put out a concept that I have had a lot of interest in, which is, what humans do, they tend to synthesize their senses. So if someone looks like they're screaming, but you don't hear anything, then you think there's something weird about that. You're looking for consistency in the senses that you get. So if seeing is not believing, what about hearing? And Harry McGurk was really interested in this. If you have seen this before, don't ruin it for other people. Okay. So we're going to see a few videos here. This is what I call, or they call the bar video.
Bar, 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 bar.
Pretty exciting, huh? What's this video called? You ready?
Bar, 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 bar.
Pretty exciting, right? 2 videos. The third video. I'm going to try to make this come up so you can see all of her here. Oops. Okay, ready? Here's what you're going to do. You're going to, well, one, did everybody hear bar, bar, and then far, far, far? Okay. This is what we're going to do. We got half the class here. So half the class here, I would like you to do this, please, for me. Look only at the left side of the video. And then class over here, look only at the right side of the video. I'm going to ask you a simple question. Just go along with it. Go along. Ready?
Bar, 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 bar.
Okay. So this side of the class, what did she say? Bar. Now, lest you think your colleagues are not there. This is up there. Let me see if I can. Sorry, because I haven't figured out how to do this really too good. Okay. What I'd like you to do now, I'm going to play it again, and just so you can see the other side was not crazy. Go ahead and switch, so you can look at the right side of the video and look at the left. And it's the exact same video.
Bar, 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 bar.
If you want to really freak yourself out, just and you can decide. So what's happening there?
lips. And that's basically change your perspective.
So much so that what the exercise was what we do here. With you, for the people that saw it, right? Sometimes it's different. When you let your vision change what you heard. I don't know about you, that's pretty scary. That means potentially I can look at someone, and because of what they're doing or how I perceive them, they could say the exact same things as someone else. And because of how I'm processing what I'm seeing, I could hear two totally different things. That's pretty extreme. That freaked me out the first time, so, by the way. And so there's a lot of examples like this that are really important for artificial systems and virtual reality. This is not a simple question I'm going to ask. We're sort of running out of time, but we're almost done. Actually, we are almost done. The answer's on the next slide. Just very quick, does anybody know why this would be important for virtual reality?
Because with the AI, the AI wouldn't figure itself into that.
That's a good response. Like I said, my open question was kind of out there. I have something specific in mind. What he said was the AI wouldn't necessarily be confused by this. But in fact, one of the things people are looking at to make AI better is processing visual and audio information at the same time. So that if you're looking at videos of a scene and people are talking, you can try to make an AI prediction based on what you hear, and then an AI prediction based on what you see, and then use a probability that's sort of the best of both worlds. In this case, presumably what could do just as bad as us, right? Because we have two things, and so I'm not sure, unless it was programmed, they go by your sound better, sounds or something. So this is important for virtual reality because of this. It says, I'll give you a chance to read it. It says that all reality is virtual. And your perception is your reality. Everything you perceive is virtual. And you're the only one that perceives it. So from a virtual reality perspective, to me, it's kind of exciting. You know what? I don't have to create a real world because no one actually knows the difference. Because everybody just perceives, and they perceive through their senses. So if I can get their senses to respond the way that they would respond to the real world, then I can create a virtual reality. Does that make sense? For me, it's a pretty freaky kind of concept. So say the real world doesn't matter. All that matters is the perceptions that you have of the world. So the people working on virtual reality spend a lot of time looking at these sorts of things so that they can figure out how to give you an experience that's consistent with the experience that you have when you're observing reality. This will be on Moodle. I put reading. It's not reading, it's just a video. It's 25 minutes long. It's not on your homework. On this one, homework too. It's going to talk more about the reality stuff. going to give you a few more examples of different things to help you understand the differences between reality and your ability to observe reality and perceptions of reality. The next multiple classes, like the next few weeks, are going to be looking at sensors and how we process sensor information, how we get data, how we process that, and analyze that to create computerized observations of reality. So that's why this is important in terms of understanding that, in fact, our own realities are somewhat virtual as well. I'll help you understand, I think, better about what the requirements are for computers. Thank you.